Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal-mursaleen. Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Ikhwat al-Islam ya ibadallah. I'd like to welcome the brothers and sisters to another episode of Urban Duat Dialogue. And as usual, this is for the purpose of highlighting some of our brothers' efforts in da'wah and thus forth and so on. And as usual, when dealing with Urban Dua Dialogue, we have a special guest, and I'm going to stick to what I'm accustomed to doing with Urban Dua Dialogue. And instead of introducing the guest, I'll allow the guest to introduce himself. And so that basically leads into our first question. And for many brothers viewing, no introduction is necessary. But alhamdulillah, we reach a lot of different people. So the first question would be, who are you and what are you currently doing in terms of da'wah? Barakallahu fikum. Tafaddal ya akhi.
Barakallah. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I'm your brother, Khalid Green. I have spent some time overseas, well, alhamdulillah, quite a few years overseas in places like Yemen and Saudi. And I think in the questions we'll actually talk a little bit more in depth about those experiences. But I am from Seattle, Washington, currently living in New Mexico. And as far as my activities in dawah and so forth like this, mostly right now it's online. And what else can I say? Yeah, so it isn't on the ground like I'd like it to be. But alhamdulillah, we just try to do as we say, so to speak, get in where you fit in. So currently I'm fairly active online, mainly using the YouTube as a platform, some other services, streaming online services, also with my institute, which is Al-Anjelesi Institute. We try to conduct classes or courses on there, which are mainly pre-recorded thus far. But alhamdulillah. So that's a little bit about me and maybe some of the things that I'm trying to do right now.
Okay, now I noticed you brought up Al-Anjelesi Institute.
No.
Because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of Muslims that look for opportunities to learn, those that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala has placed within them the enthusiasm to seek knowledge. Now, you say Al-Anjelesi Institute. I'm not too familiar with it. I've seen it before. I think it's like a logo at the end of your videos or at the beginning of your videos and like this. But if you can, give us a little bit more insight as it relates to Al-Anjelesi Institute. I noticed you stated that it's online. So is it a type of program where people have to register? If so, how do they register? How do they go about finding it? Is it a website? And thus for so on. And then tell us a little bit about the curriculum and what's being offered at Al-Anjelesi Institute, so that those who are enthusiastic about seeking knowledge, if there is something that is suitable for them, then they know about it and they can take advantage of it.
Tayyib, inshallah. Barakallah fiqh. So yeah, Al-Anjelesi Institute is an online platform. I use a learning management system. Currently, I use what's called Thinkific. Maybe I'll try to shoot in the chat or something the link. And currently, I have the first level uploaded, and those are courses that are running. I have some students that have enrolled. There are free courses as well as pay courses that you pay for in order, obviously, to finance the pay for the learning platform and so forth. Um, I've tried to design the concept and the curriculum around reviving the Aqidah, the creed, and the methodological approach to the Salaf al-Salih, to the pious predecessor. So really one of the core concepts for Athity Institute is to show to show that the creed of the Salaf and methodology is one, and that it didn't begin, for example, with Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahmatullahi alayhi, or Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. So I try to revive some classical text using a lot of explanations from some of our contemporary scholars, to kind of revive the creed of the Salaf. So the course right now, the first level that's already completed, that's up and running, it has mainly it has a couple of books on there, but mainly just kind of introductory courses on how to study at Athity, some basic courses, for example, how to get your deeds accepted by Allah, talking about the two conditions for a person to have their deeds accepted. Some other explanations, for example, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about whoever whoever wants, whenever Allah wants good for a person, he gives them understanding of the religion. So there's a whole course, which is a short course based around that hadith, and some other works. I believe in my level 1, I have a book that I translated by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Wahhab al-Wasabi, rahmatullahi alayhi, rahmatan wasiya, one of the Yemeni scholars. And it was also like an introductory course on how to seek knowledge. So really, that's kind of where the first course is, although I do have Arba'in an-Nawawi on there completely, and there may be some other core texts which establish the foundation. So I'm trying to cater it for different levels, to take people different levels in their studies. So for me, it was very important to also make it a place of really trying to produce students, trying to produce beginning students of knowledge who could then, they've had a taste of, kind of a set curriculum, and to be able to then progress in their seeking knowledge, hopefully with the scholars or with other classes or in informal study outside of the institute. So it's designed to not just, okay, you take a course and then you leave it, and which I see that seems to be popular, unfortunately, with a lot of people. There's obviously only going to be so many people who are really committed to completing a series or and taking more than one course or what have you. But I had designed it in mind to actually have it as 3 or 4 levels, similar to some of the institutes you find in Saudi Arabia, which study books in various sciences. For example, basic understanding of some hadith like Arba'in an-Nawawi and so forth, but really emphasizing a lot of Aqidah coursework, even Sharh Sunnah Imam Barbahari, Sharh Sunnah lil Imam al-Muzani, Aqidat al-Tahawiyya, and some of these creedal books that I wanted to get into really in probably the second and third level as more advanced courses. So and then also a basic course in Usul al-Fiqh and Qawaid Fiqhiyya, a basic fiqh course that's also, I teach from Imam Sa'di's book for level 1 as well. So that's already uploaded. That's already in progress. Some students have actually finished that, and which is not the whole text, but it's mainly like the fiqh of Tahara and Salat and so forth. So that's a little bit about Athity, where we're trying to go. I'm hoping to maintain it, but recently I've been really thinking that if the bottom line, if there is interest, alhamdulillah, then I'll need that support. If there's no interest, then alhamdulillah, then we just move on, and we just keep striving in other ways to serve the community and serve our souls, really, and da'wah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because it obviously it takes money to host it, takes money to produce material, Currently, I'm just the only teacher there, and so forth. And in the future, I had a concept where I would have liked to have pulled in some other students of knowledge and so forth to teach certain courses, especially things they specialize into, to reach the people, and to give them, even an Arabic course would be very important. Maybe go through the Medina books or something like that. That's something I wanted to do as well. So we'll just see. We'll just see if we're able to continue. Hopefully we are, inshallah ta'ala. No.
Now, alhamdulillah, first and foremost, wafakakum Allah for your efforts in that regard, because from what I was listening to as it relates to what you're accomplishing and attempting to accomplish, I think that that's very beneficial. Now, there are several things that you said as you were speaking, so I want to go back to one thing. I noticed you mentioned there was a book that you translated by Sheikh
No.
Al-Wasabi, or rahimahullah. I'm assuming you must mean Qawl Mufid fi Adilat Tawheed. Am I correct in that? Or?
No. I mean, that's a pretty big, be a pretty big endeavor in a sense,
Yeah.
But no, this was it. It actually, I think it came from a lecture, or it may have been. It was a lecture of his that they put in a little small book form. So it's a
Okay.
small treatise, and it's about like something like the methodology for seeking knowledge or something like this. So he just talks about various points, having sincerity, good companionship, various things to help a student of knowledge on the path of ilm. So that's what I did for the level one. Just to introduce the people from the scholars, kind of a minhaj on how to approach seeking knowledge.
Well, as you already know, when it comes to that book, Qawl Mufid fi Adilat Tawheed, the first edition is very, very rudimentary. The first bab, Ma'na la ilaha illallah. And he basically states, Ma'na la ilaha illallah, la ma'bud bihaqqin illallah. What dalil? And he brings two simple verses. Then you go to the next chapter. Ma'na Muhammad or Rasulullah. But when you go to the latest editions, there's a lot of additions, like the Sheikh put a lot of commentary and additional commentary into the chapters. But Al-Qawl Mufid fi Adilat Tawheed, mashallah, that for me, that was one of the books that, especially the first edition. The first edition, because you could see that it was tailored to new students. It gives a simple concept. Okay, the chapter, the meaning of La ilaha illallah.
Yeah.
Then it gives you what it means, and then it gives you two simple verses that you could commit to memory, right? And then you move on, right? So the student definitely builds on that. That's definitely a must-have, because then you go through, for instance, Aqsamul Ibadah. Eventually, you get to that. Yani kufr wa anwa'uhu, yani shirk wa anwa'uhu, and the Sheikh is detailed, but it's simple.
Yes.
It's not it's not a lot of extra kalam. I'm talking about in the first edition.
Yes.
Because you could tell the first edition, mashallah, was written for the students to memorize.
No.
So when you said that, I said to myself, "Oh, he must have gotten Al-Qawl Mufid into that curriculum."
No.
For the students that study that, mashallah, they'll definitely be grounded in the basic affairs of Aqidah.
No. What I did do, and instead of that, is I did use some Imam Fawzan's his short treatises. Use some of those. A couple of his treatises that I believe is in the level one, and translated, because they're also very similar, very basic. The meaning of La ilaha illallah, and and shirk and so forth, and tawheed, and very, very beneficial. Absolutely.
As it relates to the students that attend Al-Athari Institute, is there a way that you're gauging their progress? Do they take some type of how we have in high schools and things of that nature, how you have periodically a test at the end of the semester or whatever the case may be? Is there a way that you're gauging their progress, or is it more or less, listen, you're coming to the institute, here's the information, here's the knowledge, It's upon you to be diligent to grasp it, but
No.
we're providing you with access, and whatever you do with it, then that's what you do with it. How
No.
does that work with the institute?
Barakallah feek. Now, it's a little bit of both, and because it's a work in progress. For example, most of the courses that are uploaded, I think right now there's about 12 courses. In fact, I'll pull it up while we're speaking. Hopefully that doesn't mess us up though. So I think there's about anywhere from 9 to 12 courses that are uploaded right now, and many of them actually do have quizzes at the end. So right now it's just it's just a very simple online quiz to get them. It's really just for engagement. It's not necessarily like, oh, you got to pass this quiz. I tried to make them, they're catered to where, because some of the courses were designed and there was a lot of information. I've even changed the way that I'm doing courses, made them very short and more concise. Whereas before I was kind of teaching what we kind of went through, especially in places like Yemen and with the mashayikh, which was, very long durus and stuff like this. So now I've catered it more to the audience, which doesn't have the same attention span generally, and
Mhm.
so forth, and made the lessons much shorter. And the quiz is just designed really more for engagement, to make sure, hey, you were awake and you didn't just push the button and come back and then it says course complete, because I did make it to where each course you have to show that you completed it 100%, or it'll at least let me know. So there's a way to track progress. So I do like the learning management system. So really a lot of it I'm learning by having it and having launched it, becoming more familiar with the program and just the whole process. The longer I'm able to keep the platform, then obviously I'll be able to expand. But again, you kind of have to see, you're gauging if there's student engagement and there's people who are interested, then of course that's going to make you want to put more into it, because obviously it costs wealth and time, costs money and time to do it. Because there's things I'd love to, ideally, this is a longer term goal, is I would like to have kind of like basically an Islamic online college, or at least, the institute is really proper and solid with a really strong curriculum and manhaj, and where you could actually do live courses as well. And, I'd really like to take it to another level, similar to what Bilal Phillips, his online Islamic university is, but
Right.
even take it on another level, as ideally, this is what was in the back of my head when designing the courses. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to continue, and that I'll be able to expand, and just, and obviously if you can make tafarrug, if you can have the time to where you can just invest in that. I mean, that would ideally to be just spending your time in dawah and spending your time and working in developing your institute. You could take things to a much higher level, and as well as your students. So this is a longer term goal, I'm hoping, but again, it depends. We'll see how the interest is.
And now, uh, something that you mentioned more than once when you were speaking, I think that this has to be emphasized, because I think that a lot of brothers and sisters within our communities sometimes tend to forget this aspect as it pertains to dawah. Now, you stated that some of the courses people will have to pay a fee. Now,
No.
of course, we want to emphasize why that is. I think that a lot of brothers and sisters don't understand that, or perhaps they do understand. I don't want to say they don't understand, but just from the standpoint of making things explicitly clear that anytime a person has an organization, regardless of what size it is, that there are going to be certain costs to be able to pull off things.
No.
Even if we take a look at the example of the masjid, most people come to the masjid and don't contemplate on what it takes to keep the masjid operating. The lights, the electricity, the water, and thus for someone the gas, if the masjid is being heated by gas or some other means, none of these things are free.
No.
None of these things are free, and all of it takes. Well, none of it is free. So without a doubt, that would necessitate that it takes uh, some type of finances to be able to maintain these things. Um, and I think that really needs to be emphasized when it comes to students, because it seems, when I say students, meaning people who want to participate in these types of institutes, because it seems as if there's, generally speaking, an attitude like, why isn't it free?
No.
Are you trying to get rich off dawah? And these accusations that denote that, one, you're not having the best thought for the person who's organizing these things in mind. That's one. But then two, you're not being realistic as it relates to what it takes for these things to even be offered to you. You
No.
know, we're not in Saudi Arabia. The ulama in Saudi Arabia, their dawah is being funded by the dawla. This is
No.
why they could be a professor at the university. They can be an imam at the masjid. They can be, you know, what. And some people graduate the universities in Saudi, and uh, they graduate with certain credentials, and the jobs that they have may not have them in front of the people. They may end up being on a research committee, and that's all they do is research fiqh related issues, and they
Mhm.
present their findings or they present their conclusions to the body or the council that is orchestrating that research. Some become people who research the authenticity of manuscripts. They learn this
No.
in the universities, they
Mm.
become proficient at that, and they get jobs doing that. And all of these jobs, all of it is connected to dawah in one way or the other, and all of it is funded by the dawla. But here, as it relates to coming back into Darul Kufr,
No.
where the government here could care less about al haq wal huda, then we have to come up with other ways to ensure that these things are funded. And for me, when from being back and dealing with people, generally speaking, it just seems like a lot of the brothers and sisters don't get that, you know. So that's why I kind of want to just cut in and emphasize that point, you know. And for instance, like your institute is not an anomaly as it relates to having some type of fee attached to it,
No.
to certain lessons, because of the need for the institute to continue to go to operate, basically.
No. No. Really, I have a lot to say about that. And since the door is open, I'm gonna go ahead and stick my foot right on in, kick the door down, and just come mashing through.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so much to say about that. And you know what's interesting, even before as a muqaddimah, you could say, when we think about a place like Yemen, raw essence of dawah, even Imam Mukbil, even Damaj, in those places, they're funded. It wasn't, because I
exactly.
can remember when I first went to Damaj, and I remember they didn't have much, but they had. I remember they used to have this huge pot. Literally, you can't even see it in the camera, but this whole desk, just a massive pot of just beans, and that was like a big deal, because especially for the Yemenis and even us Westerners, because we weren't eating meat back in those days, and
Mhm.
they would just but that cost money. So that was
Yeah,
from the wealthy business people who, wealthy business people, Yemenis, and even from other countries, and even other governments that might say, hey, build new bathrooms in Damaj, or, whatever, because that costs money. I remember a Yemeni student of knowledge who was an engineer who was designing there was going to be a new masjid built there or something. And so it just goes to show you, all dawah, one way or another, there needs to be a purse behind it. We don't I think we come from a school of thought where we're kind of like really, really hesitant about that. I mean, you've
yeah,
been producing material and content for years. out of your own, with your own time and your own resources. But now, because of the, you could say, competition, and you can say that, you're competing for audience retention, and you want to up the game anyway. You want to produce more, you want to devote your time to getting in your books. I have a wall of books that you can see, but you don't see this whole I got 40 feet going down here. This is full. And you want to be able to get into those and just begin to benefit yourself, but benefit others. It takes time and it takes money. And as you said, for example, equipment, it takes money. This hosting, this stream, this takes money. You have to pay for even the host thing. Yeah. My cameras, I want to produce up content and up decent microphones. I need new cameras now. My phone is my main core for cameras, which I love it, but it's got a crack in it. My laptop, which I need for editing, it's almost finished. These are, and these are minor things if you look at in the scale of things from a Dawah perspective as well as a worldly perspective. For example, any types of other organizations, they're talking thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. A lot of times we just want like maybe 10 grand could set us up and really, we could do things. I know, and I won't even name some of them are even Salafi organizations that are doing Dawah and doing the same thing, have a little college and stuff in one of the countries in the West. And I saw that he raised 40 grand. May Allah bless him and preserve him and make it, and he's doing positive, but that allows for him to even make where he can basically focus his energy on totally just doing that, not just the content, but he can bring in other speakers, which he does, to teach. And you can do so much more. You need that. And I think a gripe that I have, one issue that I have, is on how broad the difference is when you see people get upset. Why are you having a GoFundMe page, which is asking for like a few $1,000s? Why are you doing that? Don't belittle yourself. I've had people send me messages like that. Akhi, what you've been doing for years. Yeah, I've been doing it with my time and trying and striving, but we need to up the game. We need to pay for it. I can't do it. My reality now that I'm in America is not like in Saudi when I was making decent money and I could just spend my time and my energy, and that was what I did for my free time. But it's not like that anymore. That's not the reality. So you need to be able to fund these projects, but you see that there's a backlash. There's some people who think that it's you just do it and then it's going to be supplied, but that's not really the sunnah to law. That's not our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, he can drop it on us. I could become a millionaire tomorrow and not ask for anybody. Yeah, it's true. That is possible. But more than likely, that's generally not the sunnah to law, that you're going to walk outside in the grass in a grassland and come up with $1 million suitcase or whatever. That's just not how it works. And you working on your own, as one individual had mentioned, just work, just do your job. Well, I do a job, but I can't afford to put my resources here. I do have a family. I have children to feed. I have, so people don't see that reality. They just expect free content, free everything, and don't want to really support much. But yet you have, this is another side note, you'll have somebody, for example, Nu'man Ali Khan and people like this. Okay, we already know they have massive platforms. They're backed by huge organizations. But this is, from what I just heard recently, a multi-million-dollar endeavor. I saw where a woman was on GoFundMe or LaunchGood. She raised $20,000 just for her to seek knowledge at his institute. That was it. And everybody was kicking out money. She reached her goal. We can't even get that as the institution itself. But yet a person can get that much money to be involved in a program like that. So that is why there is such a wide disparity in outreach and many other things. And that's problematic when you look at the whole game, that it's, okay, fine. I understand you're backed. This is great. And all this, that, and the other, you have big organizations, the name, whatever, even though you're not really calling to Tawheed, you're not calling to the correct Aqidah. Okay, let's even put that aside. But that support is there, that outreach and the professionalism, you have that backing. but the disparities are so different. It's like multi-million-dollar to not even $20. That's the disparity. It's not
Yeah.
like a few $1,000s to $1 million. So that's one of the things I see, that it kind of makes me think that people just, you kind of get almost to where you give up hope on the people, that there really isn't people. Everybody says, oh, I want to study and I want to do this, but they don't want to do any sacrifice. They would rather, a Starbucks coffee, that if you abandon that Starbucks coffee, even people I know that are beloved to me, who know about the Institute, because it's been launched now a good at least a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years now, I think, or about a year, I think, or something like this, that I've been online and everything. And you just don't, there just isn't that support. It's almost like, so okay, well, then there's other places to go, and go for it, and that's how I kind of begin to look at it. And you don't want to have that sourness, but there is a need, if we're going to deal with those issues in our community, if we're going to on a side note, aside from seeking the knowledge piece, but just in other things, if you want an Islamic counselor, Islamic psychologist in the community, Islamic social work in the community, they have to make a living. It's not going to be free, or fi sabilillah, and they're going to spend 8 hours outside of their job, and they're going to be able to meet the needs of the community. No, they need compensation, as the Christians and the Jews and everybody else would compensate their people. So I think this is something in the West in general that we will have to come to grips with, and or we'll be losing and stay behind in institutional building and remain there. So there's a lot to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm faced with the same problem as you already know. I founded a nonprofit organization that pertains to Dawah.
No.
And I think that people don't really understand. Like, the website is a nice website. We have to pay a designer money to
Yeah.
I mean, just about everything costs.
Yes.
And so now I've been putting out I've been putting out promotional stuff, encouraging the people to monetarily support the organization, and it just doesn't seem like people are getting the point. We have a few $1,000s left, and once that dries up, I'm gonna be forced to close the organization. I'm not going to continue to wonder how is this going to happen? How is that going to happen?
No.
I look at it like, if the people don't see the importance of it, then there's no more time. I can't devote any more time into it. And Allah knows best. I'm just hoping that we have a project this year with one of the mashayikh, that we're trying to bring one of the mashayikh out to the States. I'm just hoping we have the finances to pull that off. And if we can do that, then that'll be it for me. Yeah,
subhanallah.
That'll be that. That'll be like our farewell last event right there.
Subhanallah. Wallah musta'an.
Allah musta'an. Like I said, it's a different ball game, that's for sure. And it is kind of disheartening, because to a degree, you'll have people contact you about things and giving their opinion about this and that, and I'm sitting here like, man, okay, I'm hearing your opinion, but don't you recognize this? But anyway, I don't want to. So I stay optimistic, but I stay optimistic on what I'm trying to do in terms of Dawah, but I also stay realistic as well.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so once I start to come to the realization that this is not viable, then it's just time to move on, and do something else that
I think that's a common sad reality that we're faced with currently. Yeah. Wallah musta'an.
Okay, going on to the next question. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will want to know this. How did you accept Islam?
So my story, how I accepted Islam, basically I had been reading, and I was in college and stuff like this, and actually prior to that I was a musician, so I was I used to hold the mic, and So I remember, so I, obviously wrote my own lyrics, and I had a song that I had, which was called Soul Searching. So although my life, it wasn't like upside down, I wasn't going through a lot of struggles. I was really into just kind of knowing the truth. I always believed in the rububiyyah of Allah, that there was one God. And even though I was raised up in the church, but I was looking for more. I had a lot of answers. So I was dabbling. I was playing with reading the Hindus book, the Bhagavad Gita. I was reading, I was into the Buddhist, in the self-help stuff. I was into all kind of stuff, but most of the things, they just didn't seem, for one, the Tawheed wasn't there, and they didn't seem practical. But
Now,
then,
before you continue, though, your
yeah,
family background, was it a Christian background or?
yes, yep. So I was raised in the church, and I'd never gotten baptized, even though the church that my mother and so forth, grandmother, that they belong to, they believe in baptism and so forth. But I had never actually gotten baptized. And I never really accepted Jesus as God or the Son of God. It just didn't make sense, but I never gave it a lot of thought. I just said, I just believed in God. It didn't matter what I was doing outside in the streets and this and that and the other. I'd be arguing with some of my partners out there, and while we were in unfortunately a kramakumala, maybe in a drunken state, but I defended my position was God exists. My partner would be like, no, there is no God, and we'd be in this crazy state of mind. But for me, I always had that belief, okay, and had a moral compass, I would say. So when I was as a musician, I had the music, and had my song and so forth, and I was trying all kind of different ideologies, and so I started. I got the Black Man. What is it? Elijah Muhammad's book, and Message
Oh,
to the Black Man and stuff like this. So I started to kind of dabble with the nation. So I started and reading Malcolm X's autobiography that changed my life. So I was searching. So I started going to some of the nation, some of their meetings, but I never found anything except for like the extreme nationalism and then the shirk. The shirk I didn't believe in anyway. There was hardly any religious, it was all political, it was all just black nationalism. And at the time, there was Khalid Abdul Muhammad. I don't know if you remember one of the speakers back then. And
yeah.
he was he was Farrakhan's the
Spokesman.
national spokesman or something.
Yeah.
And so he came to Seattle a couple times. I saw him, and again, there was nothing spiritual. There was nothing, so I would sit in the audience, and he'd basically at the end of his lecture say, is there anybody here who disagrees with what I said? Then stand up. Because, he was going to let him have it. It's just that force, and then that extreme nationalism and so forth. So that didn't appeal to me. There's a lot of things that didn't make sense. But I was very inspired by Malcolm. And then I ended up meeting some Muslims in my workplace. I was like a part-time social worker. There were some Ethiopians and Eritreans and stuff like this that I was working with that were Muslim. So at one point, I remember one particular brother, he took me to the masjid, but it was closed because he wasn't really practicing, unfortunately, but he knew where the masjid was. So we went, but it was, it was outside of Salat time. So we went there, nothing happened. Another brother, he took me to meet, we went to a Muslim restaurant. And so I met a lot of people, and then I just ended up just like taking my shahada off the cuff like that. And I thought I already knew everything about Islam because in college I was studying about, Islam from a historical and political perspective, and I thought I knew everything about it already. And so, so that's basically how I eventually embraced Islam. We went to the masjid, took my shahada, and then, I had my dreads back then. Dreads were on the shoulders. Couldn't tell me nothing about cutting them and this and that and the other. And just kind of grew in the deen. But that's in a nutshell kind of how a little bit of my experience,
Yeah.
Yeah.
believe it or not, for a lot of people, especially within the inner cities and black communities, that's how a lot of people came to Islam. They Farrakhan and his organization seemed to be like at the forefront of what people thought Islam was.
No.
And so and then but I think there was an attraction to the militancy and to the camaraderie and like this to the nation building type attitude. But once you
Right.
get with them, you start seeing, well, hold up, this stuff is, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right.
A lot of people like,
Absolutely.
well, hold up, this don't seem like, what I read about Islam,
Yeah.
monotheism, being totally focused on the creator of the heavens and the
Mm.
earth, returning back to him. They're telling me about Father Muhammad and he
Yeah.
was Allah manifest and all this other stuff
Subhanallah.
that goes against the natural disposition
No.
that there are a lot of places within the human being. I left Christianity because I was tired of that man God stuff. Now I'm coming to this,
Yeah.
and that man God stuff is in here. Then you see a picture on the wall. That's Allah right there.
La ilaha illallah. Yeah.
And so
Subhanallah.
and it's by the grace and mercy of Allah, people recognize, okay, this isn't Islam, and
No.
they start to realize, oh, I went to temple number such and such.
Mm.
I was supposed to go to masjid such and such for Islam, you
No.
know. And Allah knows best. But the point is that seems to be a lot of people's journey,
Yeah.
I don't know how many brothers have told me that when they read the autobiography of Malcolm X, that's what guided them to Islam. That's how they got
No.
guided to Islam.
Yeah. That
You
was
know.
heavy. That was a heavy influence for me.
Mhm,
And
mhm, mhm.
even some brothers, white brothers, and others who were, his story was powerful. It reached across racial and communal barriers or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
If you were a musician too back in the day, like the hip hop circuit, especially I would assume this was in the '90s, correct?
No.
Because what was referred to as hip hop in the '90s is different to what they would consider hip hop today.
No.
Um, because I was a rapper back then too,
Mm.
and the so-called hip hop scene, you had a lot of what we call conscious thinkers in the hip hop scene, and
KRS and everything.
you had
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of people that were, for instance, offshoots of the nation. So you will have, or I don't. This isn't an offshoot. This actually came before the nation, but you have the more science. You have those guys. You will have 5%ers around.
No.
You will have NOI. You will have what they call Shahada Moors. Like in LA,
Mm.
we had a group of people called Shahada Moors. They identified as being Moors, but they
Mm.
hook them will actually be Muslim because they didn't have those aspects that would actually make them kufar. Like the Moorish
Mm.
Science Temple of America, they claim
Right.
that Drew Ali is a prophet, a prophet of Allah. So we know
Mm.
that statement is kufr. Is no
No.
way possible that could ever be.
Right.
But these guys affirm that no, he wasn't a prophet. He never said he was a prophet. The last prophet and messenger is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadur rasulullah. But then they still have some of those teachings concerning American laws and if anybody knows anything about the Moorish Science Temple of America, a lot of them seem to be trying to get something for nothing. Oh, the law is this, the treaties back
Mm.
here, I could buy a house without money, and and a lot of those
Mm.
guys going to jail trying to do whatever it is that they do, and they're claiming all of this is American law. Yet every time they quote unquote try and buy a house, they end up in jail. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
La ilaha illallah. Yep.
But at
Mm.
any rate, a lot of those different people were around,
Mm.
were around those scenes. And so I remember as a young person in that scene, seeing people, Muslims at those actual, in some of those settings, give shahada to people in those type of settings.
Allahu Akbar.
But those
Allahu Akbar.
Muslims were hip hop out. They were,
Mm.
They were in the
No.
scene, probably
Right.
rapping and things of that nature too. And although
Mm.
I knew I had the Muslim back, I didn't know much about Islam back then. I was too busy.
No.
Unfortunately, I was in the crip work life back then. So,
Mm.
I knew what was happening.
No.
I knew what was happening because of my background. Wallah mustaan.
Allah understand. Yeah, I think yeah, my world's a little bit different in that although there was that exposure, but yet where I was being in Seattle, it was more mixed. So meaning mixed, culturally diverse, I guess you could say. So even my music, so I was into hip hop, we rapped and this and that and the other, but I was into like grunge,
Yeah,
punk rock,
yeah.
all this stuff. So so what I was exposed to or what was around me was quite different. Wasn't really, I wasn't getting that exposure, I didn't even know anything about a Muslim in my high school or, even prior to that, or even up until reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and things like that, and what I was exposed to in the university, because we didn't really have that strong of a community out there in Washington State. I mean, there's a smaller black community and stuff like this, but yeah, there just wasn't that same kind of movement compared to you being in LA or being in Oakland or what have you. So, or in the East Coast and various other places. But yeah. So yeah, but I come to find out, I actually found out that I had Allah yarhamaha, a cousin, my father's cousin, who actually, she was a Muslim. She was a
Mashallah.
Muslim, and I did get a chance to speak to her some years ago before she passed, and her husband, and he just passed maybe a couple years ago now. And so I have like a cousin out there who actually is a Muslim too,
Mashallah.
but I think, different levels of practice, but may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us in them. I mean,
Generally speaking, as it relates to Seattle, how is Islam in Seattle? Is it spreading, or is it what's it like out there? Because generally speaking, I think in terms of Seattle, I know, or I believe, let me say it like this: I believe there's a large Somali community there. Correct?
no, I think it's the second largest in North America, possibly is in Seattle, of Somalis. So there is Islam in Seattle, in the greater Seattle area, is well established. I mean, we have huge communities, masajid everywhere, especially when you talk about Seattle itself. You could go north or the south. The south end is where generally it's more diverse, more minorities, if you will. And you have Cham, which is they are Cambodian. I
Yeah.
think you guys in LA, you have a big Cham community too. Um,
Not in LA, but Sacramento.
oh,
Sacramento.
Sacramento. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got a pretty large Cham community. That's where I took my Shahada there at a Masjid Jamil Muslimin, which is predominantly Cham and Cham run. We have many Somalis, different tribes, and all over the greater Seattle area. We have a lot of Ethiopians now, and they have their masajid too. Various, could be Amharic and could be Oromo, So we have so many cultural divisions, and then we have various Arab communities, and then we also have a huge Indo-Pak community, which generally tends to be generally professionals on the east side, and they are very wealthy communities generally. Generally, they are like Dar al-Ulum, Jamaat Tabligh, Deal Bundy in their creed and so forth. But they generally tend to be, they're very very wealthy communities. Like they'll raise, if the imam gets up on a Jumu'ah and he says, "Hey, my dear respected brothers and sisters," as a sister, they'll be, come on, no, brother, don't be cheap. 5,000 is not enough. Come on, who's going to give 10,000? Somebody will just raise their hand, 10 grand, 10 grand, 10 grand, 60 grand in a couple minutes. So they do it big. So we have a lot of Muslims and growing communities, which have their issues and their divisions, but everyone generally is realizing the the detriment to their youth, the dangers for the youth. On the South End, in those places, the Chams, African American, Somali, Ethiopian, and others that are, more in the struggle, I would just say, social, socioeconomically, that they're burying their youths. We're having janazas all the time from the Somalis, and the Ethiopians are in gangs now. Even the women's, they're tripping. They're killing. I heard of a sister with hijab, a Somali, coming up and killing another girl. And either she was Ethiopian or Somali. So we really have a everyone is dealing with those issues with the youth and what to do with their youth and to keep their youth on Islam. These are big challenges that everyone faces, but they face it from a different perspective. On the East Side, with all that wealth, they don't really have, the gangs and all that stuff. They are more like probably dealing with the lifestyle of homosexuality and what's being taught, and those kind of ideological bombardments, and families that may not give deen importance, so then they just go off and become secular, and they have a different challenge.
Those type of communities, they may escape that type of stuff, but they have a problem with just having the families hold on to deen. They children might want to be, the Wolf of Wall Street, something like that.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. There's different dynamics, but that's real crazy. What you said when the Somali sister shot a Ethiopian sister, and so both
it was either that or vice versa. Because I'm someone very close to me. They know the mother, and the mother has buried her son and daughter within a maybe a couple years span through violence, through these kind of things, and I mean, they're really tripping. The youngsters, they are rolling up on people at the janazas and coming in. It's crazy.
They were from rival gangs. Is that what it was about?
I think so. I think it's it's just it's really crazy. And I'm going to be going back to Seattle very soon and starting a job working with predominantly Somali youth, and it's in a housing complex area which is divided from, I didn't even really realize Seattle was like so divided, like the youth themselves, like, okay, the youth in the CD, the Central District versus on the South End, and that they have all these crazy dynamics, and these youngsters are, I mean, and it's amongst the Somalis, and everybody's just caught up in the same game, and they are rolling together, and they are shooting, and hearing about Somalis talking about, hey, on social media, I will, akramakum urinate on so and so's grave, and you're like, what happened? Yeah. There's no Islam left, just they are really man, it's just gotten it's upside down. It's upside down.
Yeah, it definitely is. That's you got a big task in front of you. That's crazy, man.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
No,
I wouldn't have expected to hear that about Muslim youth to go that far.
Yeah. Yep. And that's probably not even like other, Toronto and other big cities in the West, especially,
Well, I heard them. I took a trip out to Minneapolis some years ago. Some of the Somali brothers invited me out there, so I knew that there were Somalis and gangs over there. And I heard that there were some killings. They didn't get real extensive with me. I just kind of looked at it like, okay, I kind of visualized it based off my background. I looked at it like, okay, it must be like LA. But when you hear about, I have to say this, like, there's a certain type of arrogance an LA gangbanger has. And he compares gangbanging to LA to other areas. Right now, I'm not saying that that's with me, because I'm not a gangbanger. I haven't been a part of that type of lifestyle in decades. Walillah alhamd. The point that I'm making, and there's a mentality in LA that they're going to say, okay, they banging in St. Louis, they not like LA. They don't get, and so I think to a certain degree, when I went out to Minneapolis, I heard I heard about gang activity, and I heard that the Muslim youth were caught up in it. But I think to a large degree, when I was seeing what was in Minneapolis and the camaraderie amongst the Muslims there,
Mm,
specifically the Somali
yeah,
community, because that's the Somalis were very large numbers.
yeah.
It's the only
The
place
biggest
I've
in
ever
North
been to. You
America.
go
Yeah,
to a whole mall that was owned by the Muslims, and
yeah,
one floor is a musalla, you
yeah.
know. And so I thought, and the brothers out of Minneapolis, they could correct me if I'm wrong. But I just thought that was a small, minute segment. But for the most part, man, the Muslims are working together. I remember they took me to, it wasn't a gym, it was like some type of rec center.
Mm,
And the youth were in there playing, the Somali youth were in there playing basketball against one another. You could see the youth were all around,
yeah,
So I didn't actually see gang life, gang activity from the Muslim youth. So
yeah,
I kind of internalized it like, okay, it's a small segment, but for the most part, the Muslims, mashallah, because I was like, yeah, you want to come to a city where there's nothing but
yeah.
Muslims at. I mean, the Muslims seem like they got some power here. It seems
Hmm.
like they're doing some things here. I don't
Yeah,
understand. I don't understand how they could deal with that weather. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So,
Right.
but I'll say if you can do, I'm a Southern California man. I'm getting sick of the snow. You
Yeah,
know, so I would imagine coming from East Africa, but
yeah.
alhamdulillah, they've carved out something in that
Hmm.
city. So, but the point is, so when I look at that dynamic and then I listen to you, I'm like, man, it's gotten that bad.
Yeah.
You know,
And Minneapolis is probably a lot worse because you got to think about what you saw is still a microcosm of
hmm
the thing. If you saw 1,000 people, in the community and doing this and that and the other, you got to think they probably got, I don't know, 40, 50,000 there, or maybe, I don't know what the numbers are. So you're seeing even, 1%, a small percentage. And there's a majority of people, those people are not even coming to the masjid for the most part. So when we
yeah,
see the masjids filled up, mashallah, there's, you know, 200 people there praying, or whatever. You got to think there's 20,000 out there, and however many of them are in all kind of activity. So that's why it's hard, because our circles, we're going to be around Dean. We're going to gravitate towards Dean. We're not going to go in the city and say, hey, take me to the, take
with
me
a
to the
holy
hood, and I want to,
down there.
I want to go to the wine store. I want to see what's up in the
Yeah,
smoke shop. That's not going to be what we're down with. So you're not going to see as much of those dynamics. But these youth, and I think this is you know, indicative of the greater community, because there's so many youth that are into those kind of lifestyles, not because they were, necessarily oppressed, or that they were, that they're poor or this and that and the other. Yeah, those elements can be there, but a lot of these kids come from very nice housing complexes and stuff like this. But it's all the culture that they're bombarded with. So they love the um whoever's rapping now, that's hardcore. I mean, they like the grimy stuff now. That's all about killing. It's all about just foulness on a whole nother level. And they want to, that's their language. That's their imitation. That's their mentality, because you can remember listening to, especially when you listen to something negative, that's what's coming out. If you listen back in our day, KRS-One out there in West Coast, Paris or whoever was talking about consciousness and stuff, you're actually, that's the soul food you're putting in. So when you're putting in all that stuff, I mean, I can remember, you listening to Tupac, and you're going to be the muezzin and stuff like that, and brothers still, in the struggle or what have you, and had their habits. But you're not feeling like, you're not giving dawah when you're Craig and Tupac. I mean, you feel like you're rolling. You kind of want to, and
yeah,
somebody's looking at you, you personify that. So I think a lot of it's what they're bombarded with in TV, what they're getting in schools, what they're all in the society, and then believing that they have respect and don't have to give anybody respect. All of these things compile to make these kids, they're just out of control. And you especially see it in certain amongst certain youth and communities. You see it in youth of color, especially because that is that hip hop culture, and everything is so heavily impressionable that everybody wants to be strapped, everybody wants to be respected. They don't even know how to use a strap, but they got to have one. And then stupid stuff happens. And now these kids, 14, 15, 16, they're I don't know what they're watching to think that they can just go hold up the gas station like that on a, it's menace to society all over. These kids, stupid little kids going up in there, shooting somebody mistake or getting shot or getting locked up. And that's how they begin. It's a hard cycle that I think we're dealing with in Western societies, especially with these issues with our youth.
Well, definitely, the parents got to try their best to keep the kufr out of their homes, and at the top of the list would be music. I remember having a CD years ago. Now, first and foremost, we as Muslims, we don't have to know this because this is good enough that we find clear and distinct evidence within our text to show that something's prohibited. No. But one of the things that when you start going into scientific data concerning certain things that are prohibited and they're explaining the harms of it, then we can easily say, okay, this is from the wisdoms of why this has been prohibited. And so I used to I think I still have the CD when CDs were real popular of a speech about how music was mind control. And this was a scientific study. It was a scientific study proving that music is a form of mind control. It manipulates the emotions, and thus forth and so on. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it came out about 2 decades ago, if I'm not mistaken, where some label executives talked about a meeting that happened where label executives that were over rap labels, the Loud Records, the Jive Records, these types of the Def Jams. Some executives were called out to a meeting, and if I'm not mistaken, there were some politicians in the meeting, along with some people who were mysterious. They don't know who these people were, but they were encouraging these record executives to only sign artists that produce gangsta music. And they were at the time about to have prisons in California. In California, where me and you as a citizen can own a prison. When me and you can own, if we come up with the money, we could buy a prison. Prison is big business. But the reason why they were having them do that is because they understood that it's going to shape the thinking of the people. Now, when I first heard about that, I said, you know what? That could be, that's very plausible that happened. Why? Because at one point in so-called rap history, there were people like the Poor Righteous Teachers and the Tribe Called Quest, the Leaders of the New School. Then NWA hit. Then NWA hit, and then just start being more of that. Shoot them up, kill them up, sell dope. And things of that nature. Until you have what we have today, And so this is one
destructive.
Very destructive.
Just they take pride in killing themselves. You're like, that's like the core of it.
But the main point is the people have to recognize that this stuff is a form of mind control. It's a form of manipulation of the emotions. And so this is from the wisdoms of why this thing is prohibited. Even unfortunately, I remember when I first heard about music being haram some decades ago, and I used to go around the WD community. Oh, brother, how you gonna say music is haram if it makes you feel like this and that? And then they would just try and spin it and say, no, not all music is haram. This type of music is haram right here.
Of course,
But
everybody's got it.
if you just listen to jazz,
yeah, right, you'll be cool.
yeah. But they seem to understand. Listen, what was prohibited were musical instruments.
Yep.
Musical instruments were prohibited. These are the things that are prohibited within the text.
No.
So now, you can't spin it into the message is what makes it haram.
No.
You can't spin it into that. The fact that you're speaking and in the background there's musical instruments playing, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's prohibited.
Right. Obviously, there's some that is more darar, has more harm than others. We realize that, but that's you hear about less drive-bys at the country music festivals and stuff like that. But yeah, exactly. It all has darar. It all has harm. That's you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So there's no justification. No.
The next question, because I'm pretty sure this is one that brothers would be excited about, and that is, where did you study? Because I myself know you've been a couple of places, but we gave you the opportunity. And then let me say this for brothers, like, obviously you're on my platform, so we don't have beef.
Yeah, right.
We've never had beef.
Nah, alhamdulillah.
There's never been a problem between me and you. And I think that brothers don't know this, but I met you almost 2 decades ago.
SubhanAllah. I was trying to hide it, man. I was trying to hide the age, the distance, man. It's been some years.
Well, the early 2000s was 2 decades ago now.
I met you when you came to Saudi. I remember you guys. Matter of fact, it was Hajj. You and your boy from LA. I forgot his name.
Ghazi.
Yep. Ghazi. Yep. I remember that. Yep.
So first off, we're going to go to answer that question, but I just want to throw this out there to the people. There are a lot of people that have a lot of misconceptions, but me and Khalid go way back. There may have been times where there was an absence of the communication because I'm here and you're there like this, but we're not enemies for people that made that impression. But Tafadhal, as it relates to the question, where did you study?
No, alhamdulillah. So for me, I began my studies in America, in the masjid there in Seattle, just learning the huruf. Before I went to Yemen, because Yemen was the first time I left overseas, but I could already read Quran and I could write Arabic a little bit. I just couldn't speak it. And so I remember I went on.
Continue giving your answer. Yeah, continue giving your answer. I need to step away. I see my computer, the battery's low. I need to get the core so I can.
Okay, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, yeah. So I could already read and write Arabic, but I just couldn't speak. So then I went when I went to the East Coast, went to a community where the Imam was what's his name, from in New Jersey, Abu Muslima, his community. That's where I kind of got turned on to the Sunnah. And from there, I got information about going to Yemen and going to Damaj, because I wanted to go to Sudan, but I couldn't get the visa. And so I wanted to go to an Arabic speaking country to get my Arabic tight and stuff like this. So I ended up getting connections to go to Damaj there on the East Coast there in Abu Muslima's community. From there, I had a one-way ticket and I went to Yemen, and I met a few people like Hassan Somali there in Sana'a. I met my beloved. He was actually real close with my very good friend of mine, Ali Compton Clark from Compton. I don't know if you knew Ali.
No, I didn't. You talking about the brother that passed away, right?
Yeah. He passed away a few years ago.
I heard about him, but I never met him.
Yeah, so he was beloved from straight out of Compton. So he was real good people. So I met him and Hassan Somali and then some other brothers in Sana'a. And that's where then I met Abdullah McPhee, Abdullah McPhee, Big Hassan, Abu Khalil, and we all went up to Damaj together. We stayed in Sana'a at another brother, Walid or Abu Walid, his house, and then from there we made the sacred journey to Damaj. You know, going through the checkpoints.
You talking about the elder Abu Ali from Baltimore?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. You know he's back in the States now, right?
That's what I thought we might have had some contact through Facebook or something a couple times. Yeah,
I have a number on
which is
him.
amazing, you know, because he was there, you know, that was home sweet home for the longest for him. So he so yeah, that's how we made our contacts, and then we all went up to Damaj together. And I remember Abdullah McPhee, he at that time he had he had studied, I think, the 2 Medina books. I met Rashid Barbie there. He was studying, like, I think he'd finished the 3 Medina books. And then, you know, so different brothers were at different levels. So anyway, I started doing learning the Medina books up there in Damaj. But I didn't like the inconsistency, because at that time, you know, there was hyenas, there was no real teachers for you as a Westerner. It was other Western brothers. It just wasn't. And for me, coming out of Seattle, I was expecting something different to go study. So I only stayed up in Damaj for a little bit. I did a little bit of study there. Alhamdulillah, sat with Sheikh Muqbil a little bit, but I didn't really have the tools to really understand the Sheikh. Like, I remember I got my iqama, got my my legal residency permit. So I had to sit with the Sheikh myself and a translator and one of his bodyguards with the Kalashnikov. So we're sitting in the desert, and I remember the Sheikh got my name and he said Ish, and he was trying to understand my name, and he wrote down so I could get my iqama. So alhamdulillah, that was the time of Sheikh Muqbil, and Sheikh Yahya was teaching a lot then. Sheikh Muqbil, he was kind of sick, so he would only teach maybe a dars or 2 a day at that time. But again, my Arabic wasn't strong enough to benefit in that sense, except for just meeting him and benefiting from his manners and, you know, things like that, and seeing him and sitting through lectures, but I wouldn't understand that much. But I really would say I learned a type of tarbiyah and a type of love for the sunnah by meeting, you know, what I experienced in Damaj, but especially Sheikh Muqbil, and even Sheikh Yahya then, I would say, was very humble, very quiet. He was very serious. And the other, other mashayikh there, Sheikh Wasabi would come up, and some others who I didn't know, but they would, you know, come up, or they might be staying there for a while. And, some of the other mashayikh. So I really learned kind of just a general love for the sunnah. And then I went to Aden, and so I did that for about a year. And then I I ran out of money, went to the UAE, thinking I could study. I'd heard about a university in the UAE. I ran out of money, was broke, had to get money sent. Eventually went back to America after a couple of months of being almost broke in the UAE, okay, and seeing how different of the lifestyle and the expense it was compared to Yemen, you know, especially in those days, because Yemen was only a few years out of civil war at that time. So then I came back to Seattle, and I had the desire to study, man. I was like, man, I had all this, and I had purchased a nice amount of books there in Yemen, but I couldn't benefit from them. You know, my Arabic wasn't strong enough to really benefit from them. And so I was like, you know, I just had that burning desire. So then I got another opportunity to go back to Yemen to teach English. So I went, and then I used my time wisely. I met the Shabab in Aden, and really kind of began to go through some books like Asulu Thalatha one-on-one with certain mashayikh there that were students of knowledge at the time, and imams, and, you know, go through some books. I had a beloved brother, Adil Ubadi, who used to teach me fiqh, my first fiqh book. You know, we're going through Imam Shokani's book, Dura Bahia, and, you know, I'd never studied like that, and studied, you know, in Arabic, and, you know, so it was just a process, you know, the knowledge you layer on. Then I had an actual teacher for Nahu, and, my studies were going they were going well, but then I had to go back to America. And then I got my job in Saudi. And then from there, and that was right around September 11th, when the event happened. And so right after that happened, I went to Saudi, and I went to Hayal. And Hayal at that point I had enough Arabic where I could sit in durus and study. And so one of the mashayikh there in Hayal, Sheikh Saeed bin Halayl Hafidallahu Ta'ala, my beloved Sheikh, he gave us a lot of one-on-one. And I remember the first book that, he had me, for one, there was only myself and one other American. So everybody else, all the other students were Saudis, Egyptians, Yemenis. And, he let me be the reader for Sharh Sunnah from the front to the back, so I would be making mistakes. Qala al-Musannif rahimahullah ta'ala, and I start reading Sharh Sunnah and I'm making mistakes and the Saudis are just watching me and I'm feeling, but the Sheikh just said, he just made me read, and just do it. And I can remember asking, I said, Sheikh, do you think I should take an Arabic class, just to improve my Arabic? Because, I'm understanding maybe 70% of the Dars and I just feel like I'm missing. He said, no, read 2 pages of Ibn al-Qayyim every day and continue. And so I was like, okay, Sheikh, barakallah fiqh. So it was really through that immersion, because we were going through Muwatta Imam Malik. He was teaching Tirmidhi. He would read from I'lam Muwaqqi'in, Ibn al-Qayyim. Sharh Sunnah, I was the reader for. He would just, and he really devoted energy. You would go into his house for Jumu'ah, eating with him. We're just always with the Sheikh. So it was so beautiful there in Hayal. I did that for 2 years. And that was just a good experience. I had a good companion when I met you, I was with him. His name was Abu Abdurrahman Sheikh. He's from Philistine. He grew up in Kuwait. Fluent in English, mashallah, knows all the mashayikh, any mashayikh you could mention in Saudi, he knows them personally. He's like really well connected. So me and him were really close. We used to do dawah in English, and he took me under his wing. I met Fozan with him and many mashayikh, and Abu Abdurrahman was just really, really good with me. So that also helped me. Any questions I had, if I didn't ask the Sheikh, I could ask Sheikh Abu Abdurrahman. I can ask him in English as well. So that really was a beneficial part of my journey of seeking knowledge. Then I got the chance to go to Medina. So I was like, Sheikh, should I stay or go? Or, I'm benefiting so much here. And then I said, but, I can't reject Medina. So I transferred my job to Medina, stayed there for about I did 7 years there. But at that time I did about 6 years. And then I decided to go back to Yemen. So I asked Sheikh Salih Suhaimi, Sheikh Ibrahim Raheli, Sheikh Suleiman Raheli, a bunch of different mashayikh. I said, hey, I want to leave Medina. I want to go back to Yemen because I want to make tafarrug. I want to just sit. I'll have, I can go to Yemen. There's a place. And that's when I met you the second time when I went to Sheher. Yeah. So I did my studies, before I went, I was thinking, well, I could go back to Damaj and I have enough money and then I could just sit, maybe for a couple of years or this and that and the other. And I was studying also about Sheher. But then some of the Yemenis in Medina, they started giving me some tapes of what, some of the fitna that was going on and some of the statements that Sheikh Yahya was saying. So plain and simple, I was like, nah, I'm not going back to Damaj. I'm not with, these are mistakes. So I said, I'm going to go to Sheher with Sheikh Abdullah Adani at the time. And I liked their durus. I'm listening to it. So I went there, made tafarraq for a year, ran out of money, did some studies in Aden as well. And, just, how Yemen is. You're always going to be trying to benefit and getting in some durus. Then I went back to Saudi, went back to Medina for a year, then left, went to Jeddah. Jeddah was very beneficial for me. Even though Jeddah, I wasn't sitting with the mashayikh as much, but I joined an institute called Markaz li Ta'lim Kitab wa Sunnah. And so it was the institute for studying the Quran and the Sunnah. I graduated from there with a Sharia diploma. It was fantastic. Studied sciences I'd never studied before, like even history. And, it was just a well-rounded, excellent program. Kitab al-Tawheed, Qawaid Fiqhiyya, Usul al-Fiqh. It was very fantastic. Of course, I didn't even mention all the things in Medina. Of course, I was studying the night program in Jama Islamiyya, to do the Shu'bah, to do the language and all the books that they do before they go into the Kulliyah. I studied with many mashayikh there. Imam Abdul Mahsen al-Abad. We did, Sunan Tirmidhi and other things. His son, Sheikh Abdul Razak, Sheikh Ibrahim Raheli. Daily, I was studying with Sheikh Suleiman Raheli. Whenever he wasn't sick, I was studying with tiny bit with Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi. Sheikh Ubaida Jabri, I studied with quite a bit. Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari, a little bit. Sheikh Ali Tuwajri, Sheikh, so many of the mashayikh there. Sheikh Ali Nasser Fiqi, so I did books with most of those mashayikh, whether it was in the Haram, whether it was in Dawrat Almiya. Medina was on fire for knowledge. You couldn't even, and at that time, a good friend of mine, I don't know where we stand now, but he's with the Salafi publications, hardcore, but would be Abdullah Lahmami. So we used to, that's how I really got to know Sheikh Ubaid quite a bit, because he was very tight with Sheikh Ubaid. So we'd have personal sittings, go sit at the Sheikh's house. And, but we used to, we just wouldn't eat because you're in Medina. There was just like, we go to work. We had a lot of time on our hands. So you take your nap after Dhuhr, you're finished with work. And after Asr, it begins, and you might see Mashayikh in the grocery store. You might have questions. I think I'll pray in Masjid so-and-so. Oh, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab al-Aqil is there. I'll run some questions by him. Oh, let me see if I can get Sheikh Muhammad bin Hadi in his masjid. Sheikh, whatever. It was just, there was just so much. You just couldn't, there was no time to sleep and eat. And my health did decline from that lifestyle. But it was such a blessed time, a piece of history that you take with you. Then I went back, even after I left Medina, and went back to Yemen, and then I went back to Saudi, spent a couple years in Jeddah, got a chance to go make good money in the Eastern province. So I went back to America and, got a job to go to in the Eastern province. I lived in a place called, in Ahsa. Ahsa is where the Dawah of Muhammad of the Wahhab, began. And so I lived in a city called Hafuf, which is a part of Ahsa. Ahsa is made up of Hafuf, and I forgot the other part. It starts with the something. And I worked in a place called the Udaliya. But anyway, so I did a little bit of, there was different mashayikh there as well. I was sitting with, and, they liked having an American, it was a strange thing, have an American that was Muslim and then seeking knowledge because they were used to Aramco employees and stuff like that. So I did a little bit of talib al-ilm there, sitting with different mashayikh and stuff. But then my lifestyle kind of changed. And that's when I actually was doing a lot of teaching on YouTube as well as sitting in those durus. But it was more my own thing. And if I had questions, I could just get on the phone. So I did that, I got transferred. And I ended up in Dammam. And in Dammam, again, I would occasionally sit with certain mashayikh, do something. Oh, there's a dars in Kitab al-Tawheed, so I might sit in that or something. But I was mainly just doing a lot of my own reading and studying and revision. And plus, I was working on my PhD and my master's during this time. So I was doing my own research and just talking to mashayikh and stuff like that. So I was doing less really of the sitting in the durus so much, but occasionally I would do dorat when they would come in my neighborhood or something and they were doing different books. So that was really, and that was up until I left Saudi in 2019. So, that's a bit about my journey in seeking knowledge,
Yeah, and there was a point that you made, I think, that most people don't realize concerning Saudi, that there are a lot of mashayikh in Saudi. The ones that we hear about here in the States are the ones whose names have been propagated here in the States. But there are a lot of, you can go to some areas, like how you were saying, Ahsa, and other areas that most people probably have never heard of, and there are qualified teachers in those areas as well. They may not be as known as some of the other names, but they're very qualified teachers. But it was like that in Egypt too. Egypt, well, basically just about, well, let me say it, not to the extent like Saudi though. From places I've been, not to the extent like Saudi. And so, but anyway, bottom line is there are some heavy hitters in Saudi, that are like, for instance, they just teach at the university. They don't do any
Right.
doodles outside of that. But these guys
No.
are heavy hitters. They're in the advanced programs, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what so on. And I think that's something that a lot of brothers don't realize. Because one of the things that I've seen when being overseas is it seemed like people more or less gravitated towards the names,
Mm.
okay, if your intent is to seek knowledge, then you got Sheikh so and so over here that nobody's ever heard of like that, and you got easy access to him because of the fact that he's not known to the people.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the bigger mashaykh that is well known may have praised them with a praise
Mm-hmm.
that you don't hear, that you don't hear that same sheikh giving praise to for people that may be famous, for lack of better expressions, here in the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until
Absolutely.
you stick closely to him,
Yeah.
benefit from him, and then you go around him, and the sheikh only has like 3 to 5 people around him.
Mm-hmm. SubhanAllah.
And so if you really want the knowledge, you can get it from this guy because he doesn't have a
Absolutely.
crowd of people around him at all. You could just sit and benefit.
No.
That was like there was one of the mashaykh in Egypt when I was there, Sheikh Mohammed ibn Abdul Hamid. He was in an area called Hilwan.
Mm.
We were able to go to his house and sit with him. He was virtually unknown to he's virtually unknown to the people in the West.
Yeah.
But he was unknown to a lot of people in Egypt. However, Sheikh Hassan, rahimahullah, and the other people of knowledge within Egypt, he was very well known to them.
Mm. Mm.
And Sheikh Hassan, this is how we found out about him, because Sheikh Hassan recommended him to another brother. Another brother started going seeking knowledge, and then he, after months of seeking knowledge with the Sheikh, he tells us that we go over there, and it's like a handful of people and for the doors.
No.
And we were stuck after that. We were, and so much so that we went to visit Sheikh Khalid bin Abdul Rahman in Qola Yubiya. One of the students of Sheikh Mohammed and us, because that's how we knew this brother. We knew him from, we would see him at the Sheikh's house when we come for the lessons. So one day we all arranged to go visit Sheikh Khalid bin Abdul Rahman. And when the brother mentioned that, we sit with Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Hamid, he was like, "Oh, you sitting with him?" He got like real excited. And as we were having our conversations with the Sheikh, because we went to the Sheikh's house, the Sheikh Khalid had a set, like a series of recordings from a book that he was going through, and he handed it to the Egyptian brother and told him to get it to Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Hamid, and one of the reasons that he mentioned that he wanted Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Hamid, rahimahullah, to have it is to check it to see if there were any types of, like if he had any types of observations in anything that he had said. Now, this is Sheikh Khalid bin Abdul Rahman. He's well known here.
Yeah.
But the Sheikh he had that level of respect for is unknown to the people here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Saudi has people like that.
Lots of gold, lots of jewels. Yeah, absolutely. Tons.
Alhamdulillah. So that leads to the next question. Because I know you have experience in dawah. So when did you begin giving dawah, and what are some of the places and or masajid you've been for the purpose of dawah?
So I began giving dawah before I went to go study. That's really, we used to, of course, in the streets, and that would have been in Seattle. But actually, we used to travel. A good brother, still close to me, Abdul Kareem, he's originally from LA as well. We traveled, man. We traveled. We went to, he's the one, through him, is where I went to New Jersey, went to, Abu Muslima's community and kind of got turned on there to the dawah in that sense. So we used to, of course, in the streets of America, we go up to Canada. We called people in the mall. We have our turbans, imamas on and everything. And Oakland, California. We just go and do a lot of dawah. But of course, our knowledge was limited. We had the zeal, but we could call the people to Tawheed, and you're giving shahadas, you're in the streets. So it's that street dawah. But those things kind of inspired me to later want to go overseas. Okay. And so after that, basically, because I've been overseas for so long, my dawah efforts have been, when I was in Sardia, when I was in Hayal, again, we used to go to the, because Abu Abdurrahman was, he worked for the dawah center, Markaz ad-Dawah, is a government body, basically, who is in charge of dawah. So he was one of the duats. That was his, and he would call people in English, of course, or Arabic, of course. But so we would go to clinics all around Saudi, and we would travel together doing dawah, especially more so to Filipino nurses and doctors and so forth, and from Sri Lanka and others, other non-Muslims that could speak English. So we would do that. We did that for a couple of years when I was there in before I went to Medina. Then after that, it pretty much ceased, except for doing the dawah online. And then when I would come back in the summers to go to Seattle, I would just go to Seattle in local masajid there that would allow me to do the khutbah, or maybe I do a class in a little center here and there. And so those were more so the opportunities on the ground. It would just be on the summers, and until I started the YouTube platform, and then that became my mainstay, because I was overseas. There wasn't really any going on the streets anymore or anything like that. So I've been away, and so so then really that's really my main stay and main means of giving dawah now. But now that I'll be going back to Seattle, I'll have more on the ground work and opportunity, because I'm very close with some of the mashayikh there and imams, and and can navigate in it, especially in South Seattle and going south.
So with that said, because that leads me to a question. So you're not opposed, and I'm saying this to say for people that may have this understanding, you're not opposed to doing, for instance, in-person lectures or and that's what for so on, like say for instance an Islamic conference and like this. You're not opposed to being a part of those, correct or incorrect?
Absolutely not. That's the asl of dawah, that's the asl. Basically I only started YouTube. It was really for learning, because it was a means of dawah, but it was more so I could make muraja. It was my way of making revision. So I taught Aqidat al-Wasatiyya. I started doing durus that I was learning in Arabic to be able to translate it and give it to the people in English. And that was really my whole purpose. And it just has been going on for years now. And, but that's the asl. You're missing so much. That's a means. Alhamdulillah, it's a ni'mah that you can literally in 1 minute. I mean, I could go on the phone right now. And actually I did. I was just talking. There was some issues with the LGBTQ things that my family shared with me. So I literally went on this morning and made a 30-second, one of those shorts about that, like what in the world they're doing with the children. So the thing with the technology is you can go and you can produce something at any time in any, just like that in any place. You can reach people from around the world. So that's a great ni'mah. But the asl is to be in the masjid. So I've missed that for years. But alhamdulillah, like I said, Seattle, I know a lot of people and have the opportunity to it's open for me to go in certain communities and do dawah with alhamdulillah, and do books and get back to the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of dawah, because really that's where you need to be. But again, we live in a more complex world, so all those avenues are open. And I'm not opposed at all. And even something that's interesting, I know it's a little off topic, but on topic, Sheikh Imam Salih Suhaimi, I remember he said, when I think I asked him, I think it was, I went to his office and I asked him about giving lectures in the masjid of Ahl Bidah or something like this. And he said, go for it. He said, if you have the opportunity to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and call them to the sunnah, and there's no conditions and so forth. He said, I would go wherever and, and call the people to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he was, just hitting it hard that's, asl is get in there in those trenches. And so it's kind of unfortunately, and I know I opened up a deep mas'ala, but it's unfortunate that so many people, the labeling and the destructive behavior that we see between some of the du'ats and a lot of the people who are juhal, that are very ignorant about these issues, about speaking when they see someone from Ahl Sunnah who's known in their usul, their foundation, and so forth, and you see them calling people to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be non-Muslims, as we see in some of the brothers that are very active in that role, or in masajid where we, that are not known to be on the sunnah or have issues, but you see that they are the teachers. They are the one the people are coming to ask and take knowledge from, that everyone is so quick to label and destroy. This self-destructive behavior is exactly that, destructive for the dawah.
Yeah, Allahumma sallam. As'alallahu alaihi wasallam. Because the reality is, if we were to take a look at Sheikh Farid Abdullah, most of the brothers that came out of LA, they would say that the admin of the community wasn't upon the dawah, but Sheikh Farid was able and allowed to call without any restrictions, without any hindrances, and look at what he produced.
Yes, Sahih.
I mean,
I
like
never
when
got a chance to meet him or see him, but I'd only heard of him more so when I came back from Yemen. But I never saw him, never heard.
When you met me in Saudi in 2000, I believe that was 2002. You remember you met a group of LA brothers. Abdul Samir.
Well, I distinctly remember. Well, mainly I remember you and Ghazi and Hajj.
Yeah, because we were always together. But I remember when you came to Riyadh and visited. Well, you were living in Riyadh, if I'm not mistaken, for a little.
No, I came to stay with Big Hass. So I was with Hassan, and we all kicked it.
We all lived in the same building.
Right. Okay.
Like we lived on the top floor above Abu Khalil, right? But the point is, Abdul Samir was from LA. Lisa al-Mexici was from LA. Abdulaziz al-Mexici was from LA. I'm pretty sure you remember Sultan, because I think he was Abu Khalil, Hassan. He was Hassan's.
I do. I remember him distinctly. I remember him.
He's from LA.
That's right.
Zahid, I think you met him. Zahid was from LA. Abu Nuh. All right. All of these are brothers that sat with Sheikh Farid and were inspired by him.
Allahu Akbar.
Motivated by him. That's why they were in Riyadh. They were going to the same university that he went to.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. I didn't know the Sheikh went there. I didn't know that, mashallah.
Yeah, he went to Jamiatul Imam.
Okay.
Mashallah. Yeah. Anyway, so that leads me to the next question. What are some challenges you faced while giving dawah?
I think again, since I haven't been in the trenches like that for so many years, I think a challenge is always just the challenge of the need for increasing knowledge, the need for having time to be able to make revision and to expand your knowledge. Because really, I think calling, people think that, talib al-ilm is like a short dora or something like that. Talib al-ilm is literally until you're in the grave, and that is, even the mashayikh, they do maraja. They have different ways of maraja. They've memorized so much, or they have private sittings with their readers. I mean, Imam Abdul Massin, hasn't been able to read for I don't know how long, but, he's making maraja, that Imam, before he stopped teaching. May Allah preserve him and extend his life and bless him with comfort and ease and khair. But, so it's always that need for revision. And I think challenges also come in the nature of when you're doing online dawah compared to on the ground. There's a lot more room for misunderstandings. Things are recorded. You can make a mistake. Or I think because of the lack of tarbiyah of a lot of people who listen, meaning they don't really have the kind of educated student of knowledge, respectfulness, that everyone wants to challenge you and everybody wants to think that there's something. Some people haven't studied even anything. They know nothing about Islam. They know cut and paste Islam, and they want to refute you. They want to criticize. They want to say you made a mistake here, or they want to, so you lose a lot of that adab, the manners that we've come to expect from sitting in the gatherings of ilm. Mostly we didn't see people who were rude and arrogant with the mashayikh. Mostly those gatherings were that I have seen and been to, even if it was with a student of knowledge in Yemen in the markaz, they're respectful. There was that. I can only think of one particular situation. I went to visit my sheikh back in Hayel, and there was a brother, may Allah forgive us in him, from America. But anyway, and I couldn't believe that he thought he was so personal with the sheikh that during the sheikh's daughters, he would raise, sheikh, but what about this, sheikh? And he was the same guy who just started bringing some ghulu, some extremism out there in Hayel. But it just, and so you're wondering, because he even comes from a certain immigrant background, which is expected to know from their usul that they've had some Islamic tarbiyah and stuff, but to see that, that interruption and interjection, but sheikh, right in the middle of the dars, you got all these other students and he's interrupting the dars. So mostly you don't see that. So when you're in the cybersphere, on YouTube and stuff like this, doing a live stream, you got people with all kind of trolling, disrespect, racist. I got issues with the fetches and all these other people, S-Pub leaks, S-Pub tweaks, all these other people who, some of these guys, they got racist stuff. I mean, they try to bring the jahiliyyah out. And sometimes I've even made videos and I try not to come out like that, but like, I will give you $20 if you come say that to my face. That's all I want. And I'm not going to say anything's going to happen. I'm giving you $20. Please come say that to my face. They say they just tajawaz, they transgress the bounds. So I think that is a big challenge, learning how to not really be concerned and waste energy for the wasteful ones, for the ignorant, for the sufaha, so to not engage and learn how to disengage from those things, because you could easily, that's a luxury to have time, as to be able to do dawah and to do refutations. I mean, there are times when there's refutations that are needed, but you just don't have the time to invest that energy into making it, because we're trying to speak ilmi. We're trying to give you a refutation that's ilmi, not based on desires like Ahl Bid'ah and these other people of desires. So you try not to get personal, but sometimes people want to bring that out of you. So I think that is a big challenge in trying to calm your nafs. I mean, I've had some beginnings where I was gonna almost do a refutation and stuff, and I asked myself, and asked my Lord, I said, "Oh Allah, this is for my nafs, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stop." So it's, those are challenges, I think, to harnessing yourself and controlling yourself. And those are things we learn from our mashayikh. I've seen the mashayikh firsthand doing it. Firsthand, I've seen mashayikh that were attacked by other mashayikh or other people who went off the path, who became extreme. For example, during the time of Fali al-Harbi, may Allah have mercy upon him. But his extremism, I saw, the effects in Medina. I was in Medina at that time, and I saw how certain mashayikh were abandoned because of what he said. What he said, many students left. Certain, like of course, Sheikh Ibrahim Raheli, like there was only myself and maybe one or two other Westerners from the UK who finished his PhD. In fact, I don't know if they all finished it, but there were so many people, mashayikh, Sheikh Suleiman and others, Sheikh Abdul Razak, who were kind of abandoned, especially by certain audiences, not just Westerners, but others. But Allah raised them. All three of those mashayikh teach in the haram now, and even shortly thereafter, Allah raised their status, and they have qabul. When they go to Indonesia, they have thousands of students, mashayikh and tulab al-ilm, I mean, you can't even imagine 5,000 coming to, you know what I mean? And with their pen and paper, coming to subhanAllah. So Allah raised their status. And unfortunately, look at Fale, what happened to him. So not sure why I went off into that, but yeah, subhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help.
About the challenges, and I would say with this, with people who, I give it to you like this, because as a person whose dawah has been on the internet and on the ground, because I have participated in a lot of lecture series and things of that nature. I have taken a position because there are certain people that put themselves in the circuit, for lack of better expressions, meaning because, for instance, you have WhatsApp groups, and dawahs being given in WhatsApp groups, dawahs are being given on various social media platforms outside of just, a lecture, that series that takes place here or there. There are certain people that make sure, or that are part of these things. They may come to a lecture, they'll also be following you online, and thus forth and so on. So to a degree, you start to become familiar with them. Once I realized I had a couple of people that see me do something, and it's just like how you said, the adab that we saw and learned when sitting with the mashaykh overseas, they don't approach with that same adab. They're asking a question, but the question is not from the perspective of learning, it's from the perspective of challenging.
Yes.
They're trying to challenge you.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, they're challenging you on issues, especially especially the ijtihadi related affairs. They're challenging you on things of that nature, and it's not cut and dry or black and white like they may think. No. And in order for them to even understand the move that's been made, you have to have studied al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, the principles that are utilized that dictate how you move when a certain circumstance arises or doesn't arise. Because like if we were to take a look, just to mention some principles, yani ad-darura tabihu al-mahdhurat. You were dealing with a situation like that. That's an abnormal situation.
Yeah, right.
يعني إذا تزاحمت المفسدتان ارتكب أخفهما ضررا. This is a circumstance where there's a circumstance where this principle is applied at, but because the individuals haven't studied these principles, a move may be made in a circumstance where these principles necessitate, and I'm purposely not translating it to the audience because it's not really that important for the audience to know. It's that the general gist of what I'm saying is what's important, right?
No.
Circumstances may arise that causes brothers involved in dawah to have to apply these principles.
No.
And when that happens, somebody comes and they're questioning, but it's clearly from the perspective of challenging instead of learning.
No.
So there's a couple of people right now. I know them by name now. If I get a WhatsApp message, they're not getting a response.
Yeah.
If I get an email, they're not being responded to. Because I've dealt with them in varying different issues, so much so that I recognize it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter the principles that I quote. I had a brother call me up about a personality that I was overseas with, and basically I quoted a principle. I quoted a principle, and a person battled me all the way off the phone, basically.
SubhanAllah.
And then ask somebody else about him who's a personality in dawah. And that person said the exact same thing I said, and he accepted it from that person. But these are the same people that are running around talking about principles over personalities. Well, I gave you the principles, and you rolled with the personality had to tell you.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
So the point that I'm making is that there's some, once you get that vibe that this isn't a question from the perspective of learning, you're trying
No.
to challenge.
Mm.
I don't have time for that. And so
Sahih.
for me, I don't deal with people like once it becomes clear, this is that person's he's just trying to challenge. He don't want to learn
Mm.
nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I'm going to say to him. He's not going to accept it. I mean, on the
Right.
thought here, from my experiences, that's how I view
Yeah.
certain people. So I don't even
Yeah.
entertain them anymore. Go ask Abu Yusuf Khalifa. Go ask Abu
Yeah.
Abad. Go
No.
ask somebody else if you really want to
Yeah.
know. Yeah, go
Right.
ask those brothers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You most likely deal with them more humbly than you do it with me anyway.
Mm.
Go ask one of them. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Go ask your favorite da'i, whoever that may be.
No.
Why are you talking? Why are you asking me? They'll explain it to you. They don't even have to talk to me and they'll explain it
Yeah.
to you.
Right.
Because they understand the issue, they understand the circumstance.
Yeah.
They say, well, on the law here, Najeeb must be looking at it from this.
Mm.
Because they
Subhanallah.
understand the principle. So go ask one of them. That's
No.
my attitude at this point. I don't,
Yeah.
we have,
The Mashaykh do that a lot too. You'll see that. It got so bad that some of them wouldn't even take from certain countries. It got that bad. Like, okay, they call them from there? No, because those guys are notorious for recording the answers and spreading it fitna around the world.
yeah.
They
I
even
remember
certain
it
countries, and I could name a few, but I'm not
Yeah,
going
it
to.
was a Western country where I know with certainty they have stopped accepting some of the Mashiach have stopped accepting
Subhanallah.
phone calls from a
Yeah.
European country.
Subhanallah. Well, these are actually some Arab countries that they're really, because these guys, some of the brothers there are known for their fitna, man. They love it. They get deep and spread it. So, Allah understand. May Allah help us. But yeah, yeah. I mean, mashallah, we had a lot of sittings with mashayikh, even certain mashayikh that did a dota about questions. And it was about these things like we're learning Riyadh al-Salihin. We're going through Riyadh al-Salihin during Ramadan after the other durus that we're doing. And then he did a dota for like a week about the adab of questions. That was fantastic. And he talked about all these same issues, even calling, people who call from other countries and then they call at oddball times, wake the sheikh up. Oh, it's 2:00 in the morning in Saudi and you're calling the sheikh to ask sheikh, what or to get a hukum, a ruling on an individual. Sheikh, we have this guy, and they're trying to get a general answer in order to apply it to a specific individual, all it was just really good. He really went into it about a lot of these things that people discussed. What is their intent in asking the question? Is it to test you? Is it to challenge you? Is it to belittle you? Or is it because they want the knowledge? Or is it because they there's so many different reasons people might ask a question, we'll understand. No.
Yeah. Okay, so the last question, because we almost at the 2 hour mark and I don't want to go beyond that.
Yeah.
What goals related to dawah are you currently striving to accomplish?
So as far as goals, in a general sense, I just want to get back on the ground. I think that'll be good. As far as an actual goal, aside from saving myself and my family from the fire, is I really did want to see Ethity succeed. I think it will be a psychological blow if I don't, if it's not successful, meaning if I can't at least pay for it for another year, because actually I have like a matter of fact, it'll be in July, I think mid-July or something. And if I can't, if there's not enough interest, that would kind of be a disappointing setback. So for me, that was one of the ways to, I wanted to really get into depth about developing an Islamic curriculum and, and going into the books and teaching people properly, not just kind of a dars where, you do things like on the YouTube and stuff. People aren't invested. There's a few people out of, if 100 people watch it or 1,000 people for some odd reason, watch something about Tawheed or something, there's only 1 or 2 that might actually take a notepad or, so I wanted to actually kind of produce those more serious students to actually benefit from what you're saying and, and to benefit with what you're trying to convey to them from the mashayikh. So to me, that was really important. I didn't study, or what should I say, that you don't teach just to hear yourself. And you don't write, I didn't write my book, my PhD thesis, because I just wanted to see it in color. You know, I wanted actually somebody to actually read it and see the research that, you know, the logic. What was I thinking? Why did I move from that? I give you some intricate details about the fitna that took place in Yemen between mashayikh. And, you know, it's so relevant to a lot, to the issue of takfir, to the issue of tabdi', to the issue of dealing with progressives and, you know, modernists and, you know, all these different perspectives in hijra, real interviews with people who have made hijra and then people who have left that, you know. So you've invested yourself, not just because you enjoyed the research and stuff, but you actually want somebody to read it and benefit, hopefully. So for me, a goal would be to get Athity and also to get back to writing and research. Actually, what I enjoy doing. I want to get into my books and just go through these issues because I feel, you know, that's when you really learn. I mean, I learned so much from my you know, having to write and produce. That is invaluable. You know, there's a lot of things you forget and you're not making the maraja, but when you are writing and writing notes and you do that to teach a book, or you do that because you actually want to write something, you know, it brings all those messiah. You're not just hearing a faida and then you forget it. You know, you need to write that and teach it, and then you can refer back to it because you've written it, you know, and you integrate it with other knowledge. So that's what I hope to be able to do in the future, bi'idhnillah ta'ala.
Waffaqakumullah. Now, do you have any last words for the audience?
No real last words except to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as possible, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will teach you, as Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala mentions, that those people who are really inspired and want to seek knowledge, that one of the biggest obstacles is yourself and its sins. Sins cripple you from knowledge. Sins make you forget knowledge. Sins block your knowledge. Sins destroy your knowledge. Sins can prevent you from getting it and acquiring it, period, or reduce your status or bear witness against you. So really the sins, removing the sins and those barriers, that's a big obstacle to ilm and nafiyah.
Fake, I'm glad you took the time took some time to participate in this interview. And after those last words, I don't really think there's anything else that could be added to that. That was beneficial, and let's hope that the brothers and sisters who listened to this interview enjoyed the interview and benefited from it. With that, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. And to the listening audience, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum